This dry stone wall in Yorkshire is a great subject for an ink drawing. Stonework presents great opportunities as a subject, but it also presents great challenges because in a rough stone finish wall such as this, the irregular shapes of each stone makes drawing it both easier, but strangely enough also more challenging. It becomes easier because, well, the stones are also differently shaped, that they don't have to be an exact copy of what's in the subject photo. But the problem with that is that we can be tempted to stop observing our subject as carefully as we otherwise would. And instead of drawing the stones that are there, we start just to draw stones from our imagination. And if we do this, what happens with most people is that we tend to draw stones that become more and more the same, and we lose all the interest, all the difference that is in a subject such as this because of the difference of all the stones that make up the wall. The wall, of course, is a great opportunity for shadows, for a great variety of lines that we produce with a pen, the dots, the dashes, the hatching, as well as the more continuous lines. And we need to make sure we follow all the principles of perspective which may be in the wall. They may not be as obvious, but they're there and we need to follow them, such as the perspective lines in the more horizontal pieces along the bottom, and the foreshortening that appears as the pieces of stone move further away from us and therefore they become visually compressed. In effect, they become narrower the further away they become. And we have to make decisions about how exact or rough our drawing is going to be, how precise or loose our line work will be, and it's a challenge. And what's the difference between this and a more formal wall? Here's a scene where I did what I call a brisk ink drawing of it. It's at Edinburgh Castle, and it's a nice bustling scene of tourists. I think there's a tourist shop and a food shop in there, in these lovely old Middle Ages buildings. And so I thought this was a great scene to draw. And if you look at how I decided to render the stonework, I mean, there is a lot of detail here in the stonework. If you look at what my choices were in the end, I decided to simplify the stonework because the whole scene was the important thing in this picture. I wanted the tourist and the whole touristy feel and buzz in this much older architectural setting was the subject. And so I wasn't wanting the stonework to stand out too intensely. So I have simplified it. And if you look, I've actually made it sort of larger than it really was, because that just seemed to work, and the scale of the stonework was not an important part and was not a focus of attention. So we have to make these decisions when we do a building like this, and also drawing it just a little bit larger, the stonework. Let me have a more loose, faster, easier style that was both less intense to look at but less intense to do, and that suited the overall feel of the line work I wanted. But I want to look at now at doing a drawing where the stonework is a very important part of the overall effect and a very important part of the subject. We're drawing another building on top of Windsor Castle, but in this one, the stonework is a very prominent, a very important part of the overall effect. There are no people here, it's all about the building and the stone. So I start with this wall in front and I make some effort to copy the actual pattern of the stonework. I won't do that for all of this wall, but at least to do it at the start, I develop a feel for the way in which the stone is laid, the pattern that the stonemasons have followed. And so when I start to just sort of create it myself, it's consistent with what's really there. So as I said, I make some effort at the start to get it in line. I'm really just drawing the outlines and putting a couple of little marks on and a few little shadow indications. This is the clearest stonework I'm going to draw simply because it's the closest. I'll want to have a lighter touch further back. I've decided not to use any tone with this drawing because I do want it to be about the line work, because I think there's a particular challenge in drawing this sort of detailed stonework just with line. So now I do the part of the wall that's set back about 1 metre from what I've just drawn. And again, I do it with a slightly lighter touch to give it a sense of sitting back a bit further. Now to work on the actual building, I put in that first perspective line and I don't get it quite right. It's actually too steep, which is the opposite of the error I normally make. And it annoys me the whole way. And I eventually change it a little bit. See if you can spot when I correct the line and try and make it look a bit lower down. And I'm not worrying about the stone at this point. I'm wanting to establish some of the outlines of the building that the stonework will fit in. Now you'll see with this stone wall that I'm working on now how the perspective lines are so important with the stonework, because in a sense all of the rows, all the courses of stone reinforce the perspective line, not in the same exact way as brick, but still very strongly. And so we have to get that looking right. Now, I'm not drawing in every stone. What I'm trying to create is the effect of stonework. It's a bit like drawing leaves on a tree. I can't draw every one. I want to give the feel of the leaves so that the ones you see, the stones you see, stand in for the ones that you can't. And I particularly draw more stones in the corners and on the edges. And then you don't need to draw as many on the inside of the wall. And of course, with these sorts of walls, they do have larger blocks on the corners. So we need to show those as well, that there's a different type of stone on the corners. So I continue with as much as I can on that little window corner that butts out, and then there's part of a tower. I don't get to draw as much on. I'm not positioning this on the paper quite the same way as in the photo. So again, trying to work out the perspectives. Now this again becomes important because as these lines rise above eye level, which is right down the bottom of this picture, the perspective angle increases. So I have to make sure that all these courses of stone increase as they get higher. So I'm doing that, and now it's time to progress further along the front. There's a couple of spots here where I forgot to turn the video back on, and so there are a few jumps in the line work. Now I'm not worried as much for the front wall there to get as much stone effect drawn in. So I'm just leaving that for now and mapping out the other main parts of the building and getting these front windows in place. Again, I didn't quite foreshorten that enough, but I think we'll get away with it. And I hadn't really planned to draw the rest of the building, but at this point I decide that I will, although I do have to rearrange the paper because I'm hitting the stand for the light with my drawing hand in a moment. So there we go. So now I've got room and space to finish it. Now, with this section I'm drawing now, that's actually a curved wall in the lower part. And again, the courses of bricks, of stone, enable us to show the curve. But again, it does require greater accuracy and a greater attention to perspective. And again, up here at the top of the wall, the perspective angles are getting really quite steep, and we have to make sure we get them right or they will look wrong. And it's an important part of the overall effect because we have all these courses of stonework all reflecting the perspective. It's important that we get it right, because otherwise the stonework will look all random and it won't mesh with the scene. So I'm just finishing this wall in front, and I'm adding a bit more detail to the wall and to the stones in the wall in the front. Also, again, a lighter touch with this front corner, and then again less on the front facing facade. It's getting further back, so I have to make sure that my stones are smaller, because they're further away, they're smaller to see. So I need to adapt my line work to suit the scale, and then that's pretty much it. I'm quite happy with this. Hi, I'm Stephen Travers. Stonework is great to draw, but it's not always a straightforward subject, and I like to think of it as a bit like leaves on a tree. If the tree's really close, we may even draw individual leaves, but generally the further back the tree goes, the more we're drawing the effect of the leaves, and with a lighter and lighter touch. And I think it's a very helpful way of thinking of stonework. If the stonework's really close, such as our Yorkshire dry stone wall, we may draw every stone in some detail. If it's further back, we may draw it like the foreground wall in that Edinburgh Castle sketch. Or if it's further back, we may be just suggesting the effect of the stonework. And it's always important to keep our stonework in line with whatever perspective is happening with that building. Look, it's a great subject to tackle, and look, you'll get better and better at it the more you do it. So don't give up after the first experience. It's not the easiest thing to draw, but there are so many great stonework subjects out there, and I particularly love that drawing those dry stone walls. I reckon they're fantastic, that three-dimensional molding of the stones. But whatever you do, however you do it with your drawing, remember, it's important to have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.